Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my quarterback, tight end, and defensive rankings for Week 16. We're going to start at quarterback with a quick breakdown of some injury notes. In Washington, Jaden Daniels is out, so Marcus Mariota, I believe, will probably finish the season. Jaden Daniels not going to play. In New York, the Jets are sticking with Brady Cook. Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields are both questionable. They might be healthy enough to be available. However, they're sticking with Cook. Tyrod will be the backup, and then Justin Fields the emergency third. But Fields is still week to week. I think Taylor is healthier than Fields. In Indianapolis, this one's worth mentioning. Anthony Richardson, some elite upside in fantasy, started to practice. His 21-day window was opened coming off of IR. So there's a chance he plays Monday night. I doubt it, but it's not like Phillip Rivers gives you the best chance to win. In Cleveland, Deshaun Watson started to practice but is out this week. And next Tuesday is his last chance to be activated. If not, he will not play this season. I'm not expecting that to happen. I believe Shedeur Sanders will remain the quarterback to close out the year. In Kansas City, last player to mention is Patrick Mahomes. Sad to see the season end that way, but Gardner Minshew will get the start against the Titans. Now let's run through some positive and negative matchups. This chart shows you every single defense in the NFL, how many points per game they're giving up to the quarterback position. In blue, it's the season-long average in terms of points per game allowed. And then in red, a little recency bias, the last 4 games, how many points they've given up. So let's start at the top, run our way through. And the first matchup is a bit tough to trust right now because Justin Herbert has that hand injury. And the last couple of weeks, his passing stats have been dog shit. But if there was ever a chance to actually put him in that MVP conversation, it would be with a lights out performance against a bad defense like the Cowboys. I doubt it'll happen. I still think he's impacted too much, but Herbert is definitely capable of exploiting the Cowboys defense. I wouldn't rule him out entirely, but the circumstances make this matchup kind of feel wasted. Second best matchup is still pretty good. Would rank top 10 in the last month, but trending a little bit down. Quinn Ewers goes against the Bengals, and I don't know about you, but I'm not trusting Quinn Ewers. I know Mike McDaniel has a good system, but Quinn Ewers is a 7th-round rookie making his debut, not dying to force him in the lineup. Next matchup goes to Bryce Young against Tampa Bay. This matchup is trending up, 22.7 points allowed, and if that's what we get out of Bryce Young, he's going to be an awesome flex play candidate. I can't envision you start him in a 1-quarterback league, but I do have some stats later I'll bring up that might make you think twice on Bryce Young. Next matchup goes to Aaron Rodgers against the Lions, but Rodgers is always a bit capped in terms of passing yards, so touchdowns should be nice. Second best matchup, though, in the last month goes to Detroit. That's a good spot for Rodgers. In Washington, that's been a positive matchup this year, top 12 even in the last month despite it trending down, and Jalen Hurts should be a safe play against the Commanders. Next matchup goes to J.J. McCarthy, over 19 points per game allowed on average, so positive outlook for him against the Giants. And then this next matchup goes to Gardner Minshew. If Mahomes was healthy, he would have dominated this game. However, with Rashee Rice probably inactive with a concussion, how much do you really trust Gardner Minshew? This will be a tough spot to really believe in the backup. Next matchup goes to the Jets, so a relatively positive one, consistent in the last month as well. The New York Jets go against Tyler Shough. They gave up a ton of points to Trevor Lawrence. Tyler Shough I don't think is capable of that ceiling, but definitely an upgrade against the New York Jets. Next matchup is also positive for Jared Goff. Finally, a quarterback that's like legitimately more likely in your lineup. Consistent top 10 expectations with Goff and a top 10 matchup against the Steelers, top 9 on the year. Next matchup, also top 10, goes to Phillip Rivers against the Niners, but we did mention it. There's a minor chance we do see Anthony Richardson on Monday night, but I doubt you're going to trust that. The matchup feels wasted. The next one, though, is definitely much tougher lately. The Jacksonville Jaguars are actually the 5th most difficult matchup in the last 5 games. Maybe it's just who they've faced. I'm sure Brady Cook doesn't help in that regard. In general, you don't care about the Jags matchup Bo Nix, I think, is fine. Miami against Joe Burrow is the next matchup, which is trending down. Also would rank bottom 10. 12.1 is the new average against the Dolphins. So Burrow has been not looking too good. Last week was terrible, and I got some bad vibes around Joe Burrow. I don't feel he's like a lock in the lineup. Next matchup goes to Chicago against Jordan Love, and I would trust him as long as Christian Watson is active. Touchdowns are more likely with Christian Watson than anyone else. Next matchup goes to CJ Stroud, a very consistently positive matchup. A minimum of 16 points, I think, is the floor for Stroud this week. Then we got Lamar Jackson against the Patriots, a pretty neutral matchup as well, followed by Jacoby Brissett against the Falcons. This matchup is trending a little bit up, but Brissett has just been a very safe floor play, pretty much a guarantee for 20 plus points. Next matchup goes to Kirk Cousins against Arizona. So if those trends continue, we're going to have very high upside between a shootout of Brissett and Kirk Cousins. Next matchup is the Rams defense against Sam Darnold. And if not for overtime, I don't know if he would have been worth it, but he did finish with over 20 points. Next matchup is back to neutral. They're trending actually pretty tough lately. That goes to Drake Maye against the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if the Patriots will have the best offense against Baltimore that they've had all season. Next matchup goes to Cam Ward, a general neutral downgrade, roughly 14 points per game. Maybe the loss of Mahomes paired with being eliminated kind of takes the wind out of their sails. I could see the Chiefs just play complete dog shit because they don't care how the game finishes in the win-loss column. Next matchup goes to Marcus Mariota against the Eagles. His rushing stats keep him interesting, but I would be downgrading him in division. And then Caleb against Green Bay, I think is pretty interesting. Even losing Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, it seemed like he figured something out in the second half of that first matchup 2 weeks ago against the Packers. This game's at home. I got a good feeling about Caleb. The matchup is trending up. It would rank top 15, but 16 points isn't fantastic if that's what you end up with. Next matchup goes to Brock Purdy. The Colts found a way to muddy last week's game and prevent Sam Darnold from throwing a touchdown pass. So maybe Brock Purdy is limited, but I do trust the Niners offense, especially in primetime. The Saints are the next matchup. Also a downgrade. Would fall down to bottom 5, ranked 29th in the last 4 games, down to just 11 points, and that's against Brady Cook. So that's not a player I would have any interest in. The Jets quarterback gonna be ass. And then Baker Mayfield also gets a downgrade against Carolina. In division, it's been a tough spot. I will pull up some stats on Baker that might have you thinking twice about starting him. But then we got Shadur Sanders against Buffalo, and that I think you're just trusting garbage time, but might not be available at all. We've seen Shadur have no floor, but also an elite ceiling. So that's a gamble. Next matchup goes to Josh Allen, but despite a downgrade, you don't care. Allen is matchup proof, but he may not need to do everything this week in order to beat the Cleveland Browns. Against Denver, that matchup's trending a little bit up, but just above 16 points is just league average. So I still don't think I'm dying to vault Trevor Lawrence up the rankings, but he has played elite in the last month or so. So maybe he's just a lock in the lineup after he won you week 15. Next 3 matchups are much more difficult lately, down below 10 points, and these are the 3 toughest you can find. Seattle was a very tough spot for Matthew Stafford, and he crushed this average out of the water. Overtime, it sure did help, but he had a ton of yards before it went into overtime. Jaxson Dart gets the toughest matchup against the Vikings, 5.8 points per game on average allowed in the last 4 weeks. We also have Dak Prescott getting a big downgrade against the Chargers. They force turnovers. I would be worried that if Dak doesn't throw at least 3 touchdowns, you might be losing one of those touchdowns to 2 interceptions this week. At least that is my projection. But Kenny Pickett gets the toughest matchup of them all this season, and there's no way you're trusting him on the road at Houston. So some good spots that are kind of wasted. All of the positive matchups are for players that are really hard to endorse, except for someone like Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts. But are you going to trust Justin Herbert? Are you going to be willing to take a swing on Aaron Rodgers or Bryce Young? Let's find out how I would go about it these are my rankings. Number 1 should be no shock at all. We got Josh Allen here, and obviously if you have been rolling with him all season, he's in your lineup every week. And even if they don't need him to go crazy, like if let's say this is a James Cook game, they're up 30-0 at halftime, and by like midway through the third, Josh Allen only has like 1 touchdown and he gets benched, wouldn't shock me. But even if that's the case, I want to go out swinging with my best weapon. So Josh Allen, clearly number 1. And if anything proved to you to start your studs, it was Thursday night's game with Matthew Stafford against the Seahawks. Start your studs. The Browns have been checking out lately on defense. It's no longer a tough matchup. But that one's easy. Now let's move on to tier 2, quarterbacks 2 and 3. I think if you made it this far, stick with the player that you've been trusting all season. When it comes to stud quarterbacks you drafted early, Jalen Hurts has been a pretty consistent, very reliable 20-plus point asset. While maybe he's not the quarterback 2 that you were hoping for, he's still locked in to the top 6 at the worst. In general, he is such a safe option. And this week against the Commanders, I think they just want to close out the division. They're going to get the win. They're going to eliminate the Cowboys, and it's going to be over on Saturday. I'm trusting Jalen Hurts. The Commanders' defense doesn't scare me, and I think he goes off with multiple passing touchdowns, and I think he also gets in with a rushing touchdown. I think the tush push will be on display on the goal line at least once. So let's stick with Jalen Hurts, some high-end upside, especially if he got this far with him. There's no way I'm benching him. Lamar Jackson, I also think you have to start. I understand the trepidation, but last week against Cincinnati, he did show up, and I believe the Patriots defense is not going to stop him. In primetime, this is kind of the only opportunity left for him to really announce, I am still here. I feel like we've all forgotten about him, and it's been really disappointing in fantasy, but I do trust him. I don't think that the Patriots are going to play elite on defense where he looks like ass. I think he'll be fine. I think he may not give you 50 rushing yards anymore, but I do trust him to throw some touchdowns. He's been a good passer, and I think they win the game. I think just like that Bills game, he might be trailing early, but he'll kick it into high gear. He will tough it out, and I think they win by shootout. So I want Lamar Jackson. I want the rushing quarterback. You drafted him in the top 3 rounds. If you're in the semifinals, let's stick with the guy capable of dropping 40. So despite a few red flags with these 2 players, I think based on strategy alone, they need to remain in your lineup. Then we hit tier 3, quarterbacks 4 through 6, and I think based on how they helped you advance last week, let's stick with them. I don't fear the matchups enough to fully fade them. Bo Nix was phenomenal, very effective, and I think his path for success is the most repeatable this week among those elite options in week 15. So if they won you the matchup in the quarterfinals, let's stick with them in the semis. The Jags have been a top 12 matchup all year, and Bo Nix, I think, is capable of doing it even without a stack. I think the rushing touchdown could work out this week. I think he'll be scrambling a little bit more. I'm worried about RJ Harvey, so they'll be forced to throw it a little bit more, and I think in desperate spots, I think Bo Nix will take off with his legs. If that hits, then we have that 30-point upside that I'm chasing. Last week was really encouraging. I think he'll pull it together again. I want to trust Sean Payton this time of year. The better offensive play caller, I think, will be on display this week, and I trust Bo Nix quite a lot. I also think Trevor Lawrence will give him a good run for his money. I believe in Liam Cohen as well. The Jaguars offense has been really humming since Jacoby Myers came to town and Brian Thomas Jr. got healthy. The Broncos are also a great spot for tight ends right now, so I think Brenton Strange could be the cherry on top. If Strange scores a touchdown, you will get a very great game out of Trevor Lawrence. I would trust him. There's also some rushing upside, and he's been playing lights out. I was wrong to fade him last week. I ranked him top 10 a few weeks ago, and I kind of just thought it was matchup driven. I didn't believe it, and I sure paid the price with my rank last week. I apologize if I didn't tell you to start Trevor Lawrence, and it cost you. So just didn't see it coming. The Jets matchup was good, but didn't envision 6 touchdowns from Trevor Lawrence. Was it 5 or 6? I know it was a lot. He was the best quarterback by a lot. So I think let's reward him and keep him in the lineup. The vibes are good. The matchup is scary, but since Surtain got hurt, even since he's come back, they actually have been a little easier to play against. Surtain might not be 100%, and their secondary is not as deadly. More of a neutral matchup as of recently. The Broncos have given up the 13th most fantasy points to quarterbacks in the last 4 games. Trevor Lawrence, I think, will be fine. And his upside lately feels like you have to keep starting him. I would feel sad if he went off again, and I benched him. Jared Goff also had a great game last week, and I'm kind of confident it happens again. The matchup isn't as good against Pittsburgh, but the Lions are really showing up after a loss, and their season's on the line. They cannot afford to lose another game. They have to win out and get a little bit of luck as well. So the Lions, I think, will step up here. I think the Steelers are scary at times, but mainly when they play in Pittsburgh, not on the road. The Steelers can afford to lose this game. As long as they beat the Ravens in the final week, the Steelers will advance and they'll have a winning record as well. So I don't think their defense will show up this week. In Detroit, I also like it's indoors. Goff always plays great at home. With their season on the line, give me Jared Goff to play lights out. I'm trusting Amon-Ra. I know J-Mo will play well. And if Jahmyr Gibbs contributes in the passing game, that's where we get that elite ceiling, that 30-plus point upside with Jared Goff. But just like last week, I think we can hit 20, if not 25, and I do trust him at home a lot more. So I like Jared Goff a lot. Top 6, I want to keep him in the lineup. Very high upside, just like last year. I like Jared Goff a lot in the playoffs. But now we've hit tier 4, and I really trust the floor with a lot of these players. Some of them have gotten you this far. Some of them I think are on the rise, and I really wish that I trusted Matthew Stafford, because despite the downgrade in terms of who his opponent was, I think in hindsight it was dumb of me to not rank Stafford in the top 10. So I'm just acknowledging that. I'm not going to lie to you. On Thursday, I was worried about the weather, the matchup, the lack of Devontae Adams. Seattle scared me a little too much. I didn't rank Stafford in the top 10. So I don't think these players have a chance to outscore Stafford, but I suppose it's possible. It's definitely not impossible. He only had 3 touchdowns, and maybe some of these guys are destined for even more. But on Sunday afternoon, I think the Battle of the Birds, the Cardinals hosting the Falcons, is going to be one of the highest shootouts you can find. I don't see a single ounce of defense being played. The Falcons have the playmakers, especially with London coming back. They're going to drop a ton of points. And I think the volume for Jacoby Brissett is going to be insane. We know that McBride is great. Michael Wilson's been stepping up, and he gets Marvin Harrison Jr. back. As if Harrison is healthy, then we have genuinely like 5 passing touchdown upside with Jacoby Brissett. I love this spot for him, and he's been one of the safest plays you can find since taking over. Only like 1 game with less than 20 points since he's become the starting quarterback. He is phenomenal. He's money in the bank. I really trust him. I like the matchup. I want Jacoby Brissett in my lineup. Last week was confirmation. Even against the Texans, he had a great game. So against the Falcons, this time at home, no doubt about it, I think Brissett is a lock in the top 10. Maybe not as good as Stafford, but a great game I would expect to income with Jacoby Brissett. With Drake Maye, he's been awesome this season, and in primetime, I think he'll at least give himself a shot against Lamar Jackson like he did last week. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. That Bills matchup was tough. The passing yards weren't there, but in general this year, he has stepped up in that regard. I think he'll be better than last week. The matchup isn't as scary as the Bills' defense is, and he still found a way. He did go over 20 points with his rushing contribution. So that's been missing from his game this year. They've really tried to develop him as a passer, but he's still capable of doing that, and I think with the necessity of putting it all on the line against the Ravens here, I could see it happen again. I could see him run the ball pretty well against Baltimore. So if that adds on to what you're already expecting from Drake Maye, he could give you 25 points as well. I think the floor is really safe and the upside's definitely there. It has been all season. So Drake Maye, I think, has fallen out of the MVP conversation, but in primetime, who knows? Maybe he puts up one of the best games we've seen all season. So I do want him in the lineup, definitely top 10, but I will acknowledge in hindsight, he's not going to go over what Stafford put up on Thursday. Brock Purdy, I also don't think will outscore Stafford, but Purdy, I think, will be very good, just like last week. The floor is very safe, but if you look a little closer, the Indianapolis matchup is not very easy, and I could see them limit the production like they did against Sam Darnold. The Niners probably don't view this game the same way that Seattle did. Seattle didn't want to expose any of their new tricks. They wanted to get out of that game fully healthy and play the Rams at full strength on short rest. So that, I think, factored in. I think the Seahawks didn't quite empty the playbook in the way the Niners might, just to show off. The Niners in primetime, I think, want to remind everyone, yo, we're still awesome, and we are still probably the best team in the conference. They still have a shot at getting the 1 seed. Because the Seahawks won last night, there is actually a better path for San Francisco to be the 1 seed than the Seahawks. It'll probably come down to week 18, but the Niners are definitely in play for a playoff bye. So I like Brock Purdy this week. I don't think they have to go lights out, though, to win, and that's where maybe game script does impact you a little bit. But going to trust the floor. He's been a very safe play, just like last week. I think 20-plus points is very safe to project. At quarterback 10, I feel good about CJ Stroud. I think Stroud has some really high upside this week. The Raiders are a great spot for them to get their offense right and establish a better connection with some of the younger pass catchers on this roster. If they're going to make it far in the playoffs, they need guys like Jaden Higgins and maybe even Jalen Noel to start to step up. If they don't contribute consistently, I don't feel great about the offense. So against the Raiders, they have the luxury of testing some stuff out, but I will acknowledge, on paper, the Raiders are a neutral spot. They've given up an average of like 16.5 points per game all year long, and it's not really impressive even in the last month. It's kind of uninspiring in terms of matchup stats. Less than 200 yards passing allowed to their last 4 opponents, on top of 1.5 passing touchdowns per game. That's 6 in the last 4 weeks. However, the week before that, they gave up 4 passing touchdowns, and that's where I'm excited with CJ Stroud. I think he could give you some elite passing touchdown stats this week against the Raiders. However, they're not really catching many interceptions, only 2 in the last 5 games, and they are contributing with some decent numbers on the ground as well. But maybe CJ Stroud is immobile again, and maybe you don't get that upside. I think you're very dependent on touchdown passes, but this week I like that to hit against the Raiders. I think it's a good spot here, and I think Nico will play great. If Jaden Higgins can have his best game of the season, then Stroud will pay off. That is not a guarantee at all, but I do feel optimistic about the Texans offense against the Raiders. I think from a bust-proof standpoint, Stroud is a very safe play. I think he will give you that extra touchdown, go over 20 points, not envisioning a single turnover either. I think that really helps keep him as a safe option in, at worst, the top 12. Obviously, I wish I had Stafford ranked above him, but Stroud, I think, will pay off with a safe floor. However, in tier 5, there's some bolder takes in this tier, and obviously Stafford at the bottom looks gross, looks so stupid in hindsight. I really wish I just trusted the stud. I don't think I would have ever ranked him above Goff. Given the circumstances, even Vegas had some low expectations. The over-under point total on that game was 41.5 on FanDuel. That is crazy when you think about what ended up happening. 38-37 is not what they were projecting. There was bad weather, no Adams, and then the Seahawks were a extremely tough spot, bottom 3 on the year. So I was wrong on Stafford. I hope you didn't listen to me. I hope you missed the start-sit video in regards to Stafford. A terrible downgrade with an MVP candidate. I was worried about Adams. I overreacted. I apologize. So just understand that in context. Like, it doesn't look good, but at the top of this tier, I do have Kirk Cousins, who is not expected to outscore Stafford. I'll mention that as well, but I do think he's going to play awesome this week. I really love the matchup. The Cardinals are an amazing spot. Their defense has totally given up, and they used to be tough To start the year, they were bottom 5, and they've slowly trickled up to 17th on the season, and that's because in the last month, they're the 5th best matchup for opposing quarterbacks. 9 passing touchdowns in the last 3 games. It would be 8, and I do trust Kirk Cousins a lot more with Drake London coming back to the lineup. If he doesn't throw any interceptions, which haven't happened at all the last 3 games by the Cardinals, then Kirk Cousins will, I think, be lights out in this matchup. I think 3 touchdowns is not unrealistic to project. I expect a big shootout here. I prefer Brissett, but I think Cousins proved to you last week against the Bucs in a good matchup. He's ready to prove himself. He wants a new contract with a new team next year, and he is putting his resume out there. He's putting out good film, especially with London. I think it'll be potentially even better than last week. Pitts had a great game. I think London will be hungry to step up as well. So love Cousins. I think he's an awesome upside swing. Obviously, he's low rostered, so you can pick him up. And I am genuinely telling you, I trust him a bit more than everyone else remaining. I think the circumstances are ideal, and I do think he'll be good in fantasy. I totally understand ignoring this entirely, especially with Stafford ranked behind him. It looks idiotic, but I do believe the floor is very safe and the upside is totally available. Just like last week, I believe he can go over 25 points. But behind him, I do have Caleb Williams, who's a big up and down, hard to project variance play, high risk, high reward. When he has a bad game, it can be less than 10 points, so don't be surprised if you get totally burned. But the Packers matchup is definitely not as scary without Micah Parsons, and if it wasn't for the injury to Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, I'd probably have him ranked 4, if not like 3, 5 spots higher. I think he might be better than Brissett if that was the case. But I'm worried about that. I think the tight ends really have to step up. And if anything, Ben Johnson probably just wants to run the ball a little bit more. So Caleb could definitely be burned by game script. I also think this game could turn into a shootout and the upside could be tremendously high. I do think you could regret benching Caleb because he has showcased that elite potential at times. He has the cannon. He has the rushing stats available. Will they both be on display? You need both to really have a good game. So good luck. I'm not dying to expect both aspects to hit, but I do think from a floor standpoint, just like Kirk Cousins, I think close to 20 points is not that bad of a bet. The Packers matchup hasn't been as difficult. As of late, it would rank as the 15th best matchup overall. So trending positive, a neutral spot, not a downgrade. I think Caleb has that upside worth betting on, but I really believe Cousins is a safer play. Floor is higher with Cousins, in my opinion. Next, behind him, I have Jordan Love, and I definitely think he can go toe-to-toe with Caleb as long as Christian Watson is indeed healthy, which everything I've seen indicates that's probably the case. I do think Love is a safe play. So I like the touchdown upside. He's played awesome. And against the Broncos, that was a tougher matchup than the Bears. They've forced some turnovers lately. I could worry about some interceptions here. However, I also expect at least 2, if not 3 touchdowns. 3 feels more likely than 2. So I think they'll more likely have a high-scoring game. The upside's there, but also some risk factoring in as well. This division could lead to a low score in this spot. But Dak Prescott, I'm worried about tremendously. The Chargers have been a very difficult matchup. It would rank bottom 2 on the season. However, I really overreacted to Stafford against Seattle. Definitely a player that should have been matchup proof, and Dak kind of qualifies as well. But to pretend like I don't believe that the Chargers defense is going to force some turnovers, I think would be a lie. That I think will be the kryptonite of Dak Prescott, because we've seen at times he hands it off in the red zone. Javonte vultures him and he just doesn't end the game with multiple touchdowns. If that's the case, you will get burned, because I think 2 interceptions is definitely possible. We saw Jalen Hurts have 5 total. So Dak, I worry, is going to be losing points quite often this week. The matchup is terrible. That Jesse Minter Chargers defense is one of the best in the NFL. So Dak, I am downgrading. It's a terrible matchup for George Pickens, who has been looking like shit. If I trusted Pickens, then I would overrule the downgrade with Dak Prescott. I would definitely keep him top 10. but similar to Stafford losing Adams, it feels kind of like that applies with George Pickens. He's not contributing in the same way right now. So Chargers are just such a tough spot. Jake Ferguson, I think, will contribute, but if Lamb doesn't score a touchdown, I don't think you're going to get 2 passing touchdowns out of Dak Prescott. Good luck here, but I think the floor is very low, under 10 points. Then we have Stafford, and I repeated it several times. I was definitely wrong to downgrade Matt Stafford, but overtime was a big factor. There were a lot of yak that I didn't envision without Devontae Adams. So sadly, didn't work out. I regret it. No doubt. I regret it. However, once we hit tier 6, unless you're in Superflex, I am telling you to bench these players. Not in the top 15, so in a 12-team format. If you can pick up Cousins, I would bench these quarterbacks for Kirk Cousins. And pretty much everyone can still acquire Kirk Cousins. So let's not pretend like I'm fading these guys. The matchup for Baker is really tough. And I looked up his matchup stats against the Carolina Panthers. They are not inspiring at all. In his last 4 games, he's only averaging 15.2 points per game against Carolina. It's all on the back of the last time they played. Last year, they got into a big shootout. I believe it went into overtime. He had 359 yards passing and 5 passing touchdowns in that game. That was 34.6 points. So the upside's definitely possible with Baker. They got embarrassed by the Falcons, coming off some extra rest on the road in a must-win division game. I think they play well, but the Panthers have been having his number other than that game. If you look at the previous 3, really, really rough stats. Only 2 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions in those previous 3 games, and an average of 8.9 fantasy points. Really dog shit numbers, except for the last time they played. So if anything, this game is more must win for Carolina. The Bucs can afford to lose it. They still would control their own destiny if they beat Miami and then beat Carolina again the week after. They still have another game against the Panthers. So for that reason, I believe Carolina is in more dire straits, will play better on defense. And I think if one guy I'm worried does not throw more than 1 touchdown this week, it is Baker Mayfield. The Panthers have stopped him more often than not. So good luck there. I'm trusting Evans, but beyond that, I think it's a wash who's actually going to be trustworthy. The Panthers are giving up a lot of points to running backs, and I do think rushing touchdowns could be the Achilles heel of Baker. Watch him hand it off a lot in the red zone this week. Next up, we got Justin Herbert, and the matchup is awesome. The best on the year, so I really want to rank him higher. I want to have him above Dak. I plan to start him for a long time in the subscriber league this week. However, I didn't advance, so while I am going to start him, there's no risk involved, and if I was still alive, I don't think I would do it because I'm a Charger fan. It's going to feel nice to start him against the Cowboys, and the matchup's good. So you want to talk yourself into it. Start quarterbacks against Dallas, regardless of who it is. But then you factor in how Herbert's been playing the last few weeks, and it's just so hard to feel confident that you're actually making the right decision. The hand injury is a big issue, and despite his rushing stats still being okay, he's not throwing it well, but maybe that was just the matchup the last 2 games. The Eagles played him pretty tough. That was some tough coverage on defense, and that was right off the hand injury. And then against the Chiefs, that's been a tough matchup all throughout his career. Definitely not an ideal spot either in the cold weather. So against the Raiders, he also got hurt. Maybe didn't play awesome either. I need to know that hand injury is behind him to feel safe with Herbert. But the matchup's so good, I still think he'll play decently well. I think you'll get multiple touchdowns from Herbert again. But if he burns you, you know why it would happen. There's definitely some writing on the wall that says you can't trust him. That's why I would just go Cousins. I genuinely believe Cousins against the Cardinals is safer than Herbert against Dallas. The matchup's great for both, and Cousins isn't hurt, also gets London back. That, I think, is a better option. But Herbert's still in the top 17. I suppose in Superflex, he's definitely staying in the lineup. A matchup like this in a 2-quarterback league, I would want that in the lineup. But Joe Burrow, I'm genuinely terrified to trust. The vibes are off. You can't tell me you're paying attention to the situation and you trust Joe Burrow. Just look at his picture. He's the only one with emo hair. He's the only one covering some of his face with his hair. Like the writing was on the wall back in the summer when he took this photo with the team. He wasn't feeling too happy. Maybe I'm reading into things too much, but his comments are just so indicative that this is Carson Palmer 2.0. I believe he is at risk of retiring in the next calendar year. I do not feel like Joe Burrow wants to play. Last week, they did not show up at all. Will they bounce back? I'm not confident. There's nothing to play for. If anything, just get a better draft pick and ship the game. Why play at the top of your ability? But if you tell me T. Higgins clears concussion protocol in time and is fully active, Burrow gets all his weapons, against the Dolphins, I wouldn't be terrified. But there's some weird weather in Miami. It's going to be hot as fuck, 82 degrees and humid. We have seen elite offenses shit the bed in those circumstances. The Bills come to mind, as well as the Falcons. Maybe not an elite offense, but also look like they were inept in the humidity in Miami. Good luck with Burrow. I got a bad feeling. I don't want to endorse it. You also didn't make it this far with Burrow. He's missed so much time. I think if you've been piecing it together, maybe Brissett was your backup. Definitely go Brissett. I would also even go Cousins. I think you should keep streaming the position if you have Burrow. Not start him this week, but maybe you think I'm crazy. Maybe the Stafford ranking completely delegitimizes my opinion, but I am worried. The writing on the wall says fade the Bengals offense. Then we got Tyler Shough against the Jets, and maybe it was just the matchup why Trevor Lawrence was so elite, but Shough is not that safe of an option. He also loses Devon Vele and Devin Neal. This offense will be a bit strange this week, and despite trusting Olave a lot, how much can Juwan Johnson pick up the slack? I don't trust a third pass catcher in New Orleans. So you're going to rely on rushing stats while Shough is capable of that. That feels a bit over optimistic, but the Jets matchup's awesome. You know that defense is quit. So I do think in Superflex, he's definitely top 20. I'd be fine starting him, but more of a DFS option. Not going to press my luck with the rookie in New Orleans this week in the semifinals. Then though, we have Bryce Young, and I genuinely think if there's one player I'm like way too low on in the ranks, it would be Bryce Young. But in division, you never know what'll happen. The Buccaneers defense got embarrassed last week by Atlanta, so maybe they look much sharper. And maybe Bryce Young does shit the bed. His floor has been very, very non-existent in his career quite often. So there have been good games though, and I do want to keep that in mind. This Buccaneers matchup is actually elite right now. If you look at just last week for Kirk Cousins, he had 26 fantasy points, and that is indicative of what you can expect most of the time. Last 4 games, the Bucs defense are giving up 22.7 points per game to the quarterback position. So an elite spot, very big upgrade, and especially in division, there is some familiarity. I looked it up. Bryce Young owned them last year. His stats, at least in fantasy, were off the charts, at least for him. He averaged 27.8 points per game. You heard that right. 27.8 from Bryce Young in 2 games against Tampa Bay with Dave Canales as the head coach. These are the stats, an average of 251 yards passing with 3 passing touchdowns, so 1.5 per game. He had no turnovers in those 2 games. He also added 28 rushing yards per game on average, along with 3 total rushing touchdowns. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in 1 game, another in that second game. So that is where you need to hit with Bryce Young. If he contributes on the ground with a rushing touchdown, the ceiling is legitimately 27 plus points. So I'm hopeful for that. I think it's possible that Bucs defense is just that hot garbage, and I think they're not having the same urgency as the Panthers do. I think with the season on the line for Carolina, Bryce Young will exploit the matchup. I think he'll throw it well, and I like the upside with Jalen Coker hitting recently. The touchdowns have more chances with Bryce Young. So I like him a lot. I want to rank him higher. I think in DFS, honestly, he's awesome, but then the floor is so low, and to bet on him rushing the ball this year is actually not a safe bet at all. He hasn't ran it anywhere near as much this season as last year. So if you remove 25 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, that's 8.5 points off that 27-point average That's less than 20, and that definitely reminds you of the risk. So good luck. I don't think he can burn you, but I also think there's such good, better options in the semifinals. I don't think I want to pick him up off the waiver wire and plug him in. Odds are that's what you'd have to do to start him. If I'm going to do that, give me Kirk Cousins against Arizona. Next up, though, we got Aaron Rodgers against Detroit. That's been an awesome matchup, top 4 on the season, along with top 2 in the last month. And the Lions are giving up 344 passing yards per game in that stretch, on top of 10 passing touchdowns. If there was ever a time where Aaron Rodgers could have the game of his life, it would be in this game. However, Rodgers has never gone over 250 yards passing this season. That's just not what he does. And despite a great matchup, I kind of feel like the Lions defense will show up. The Steelers, I think, might write this game off. Coming off the high of last week, they can afford to lose this game. I think they're going to not show up as well as they can. So I don't really trust that Steelers offense generally. While the matchup's awesome, Rodgers, I think, is still kind of limited to maybe 20 points max. I doubt he throws an interception here, but I do think the touchdown passes are so critical. And even with 3, it still feels like 20 points is the maximum. So not going to trust him. I think it's not worth it. I think there's better options off the waiver wire. I'd rather go Kirk Cousins. But I do understand the argument. I do like DK Metcalf a lot this week. I do think Rodgers can capitalize if he gets another touchdown to some tight ends and a running back. However, in tier 7, these are players I'm absolutely benching unless it's a very deep super flex league and you can't pick up anyone on the wire. They're all taken and spoken for. Then I would understand, but your hand needs to be forced. Odds are that's not the case. So let's run through it. This final tier, I would be benching all of them. Despite a great matchup for JJ McCarthy, I still just don't trust that offense. McCarthy needs rushing stats, and even with a rushing touchdown, in general, he's just not a good option in fantasy. So not going to trust him. The Giants game, I think, is more low scoring. So he's just not a player I want to put my faith in. And same with Mariota against the Eagles. If it wasn't against the Eagles, maybe I'd be more interested. Like last week against the Giants, I did kind of fade him a little bit, but I did have him ranked a tier above. This week, I'm worried against Philadelphia. So I would probably pass. Without Zach Ertz, there's a reliable target that's missing, and I do think they can lock up Terry enough to limit Mariota. So needs the rushing stats. I doubt it hits at a high enough number to cover some turnovers I would project with the Commanders quarterback. But Darnold did play decently well, went over 20 points, but overtime was very critical, and I don't think it would have been as good had that not happened. So clearly you got a bit lucky if you started him. It started off rough. He had some turnovers and sacks consistently. It looked brutal, but then once they were down by 16 points, something clicked and Darnold went off. So it turned out okay, but in hindsight, I don't regret ranking him this low. I regret Stafford, but I don't regret Darnold. He had been owned by the Rams in his history against Sean McVay. But Jaxson Dart, it's a terrible matchup. The Vikings are the toughest on the season, let alone the last 4 games. And I definitely want to downgrade Jaxson Dart. Not going to trust him. I think the turnovers could be sky high. And then I also worry that he'll go in the blue tent and not finish the game. It feels like he's due to not finish a first half with a concussion. I expect him to come off the field into the blue tent a couple times once again. So good luck with that. I think the risk is too high, that Brian Flores' defense is too good. But Quinn Ewers, I will acknowledge, is a little bit interesting in this bottom tier, though. No chance I would trust him. I think he's going to be far worse than Sam Darnold, but that Mike McDaniel system does offer some upside. The Bengals defense also is a good spot. So a great matchup, feels wasted, but maybe with his career on the line, maybe he shocks us. I doubt it. I don't expect him to be the next Brock Purdy. 7th round quarterbacks generally don't play well. But Cam Ward, I think, could step up. I believe the Titans will win against the Chiefs, but lately, if he's not throwing it to the tight end position, nothing else works. And Tony Pollard is the reason why they had that win against Cleveland a few weeks ago. But last week, Pollard was kind of the only positive thing again. Cam Ward could throw touchdown passes, but in general, Not expecting more than like 13 points from Cam Ward. But against Buffalo, that matchup's been really tough all year, so not going to upgrade him while he has showcased some elite upside at times. I doubt that'll hit against the Bills, but maybe garbage time does work out. That's the only way I would ignore it otherwise. And that's it at quarterback. Those are my top 28 at the position, and we have 4 players missing, but there's no way you can even pay me to convince me that starting Kenny Pickett, Brady Cook, Phillip Rivers, or Gardner Minshew is a good idea. Maybe Minshew, but to be honest, I think I'd rather go Quinn Ewers if I was that desperate. I prefer the Bengals matchup than the Titans this week. At least Quinn Ewers has healthy receivers without Rashee Rice. I'm not going to trust Gardner Minshew. Now that we're done with quarterback, let's move on to tight end and give you some quick injury updates at this position. In Cleveland, David Njoku is out, so Harold Fannin will continue his dominance in the target share. Meanwhile, Mason Taylor is also out in New York, so maybe Jeremy Ruckert gets another couple receptions of his own. In Cincinnati, Noah Fant has been ruled out, so maybe you can feel a bit more confident with Mike Gesicki, but it's still a big committee at tight end with the Bengals. In Tennessee, Gunnar Helm is questionable with a toe injury, but on Friday he was full in practice. I fully expect Gunnar Helm to play on Sunday. Lastly, in Chicago, Cole Kmet also is questionable, dealing with an ankle and knee injury, but then on Thursday, their last day of practice, they did not practice Friday. They play on Saturday. Cole Kmet was full in practice, so expect him to play as well. Cole Kmet should be good to go. They're going to need him without Rome Odunze or Luther Burden. But here are the defensive matchups for the tight end position. Let's run through it hopefully as fast as possible. The best matchup all year has been Cincinnati. However, the well ran dry with the Ravens tight ends last week. But maybe you're willing to trust it despite Quinn Ewers. Maybe you just can't help yourself. Darren Waller gets the best matchup upgrade on the slate. Second best matchup goes to Shane Zylstra. The Steelers are a good spot, but I don't trust the Lions tight end. Mike Gesicki gets the third best matchup this season, but in the last month it would rank number 10. Still a great upgrade though. Mike Gesicki's actually kind of interesting, but watch Tanner Hudson vulture you with a touchdown. Dallas Goedert gets a great matchup, and he's definitely a safe play. So this I think, is the most legitimate upgrade of them all. Dallas Goedert against Washington, the fourth best matchup all year long. Kyle Pitts gets the fifth best matchup, so expect another awesome game, some more dominance out of Kyle Pitts. He was on the injury report earlier this week, but he's off of it. He is good to go. I'm definitely starting Kyle Pitts after last week. The sixth best matchup this year goes to Tyler Warren against the Niners, but with Phillip Rivers, I doubt I would trust that. I would hope that Anthony Richardson can come back to the lineup before the season's over. But Warren, if Rivers is active, not a safe play at all. Just hoping for a 2-yard touchdown. Nothing else is valuable with Tyler Warren. Otherwise, this next matchup is the best you can find last 4 games, but it feels wasted on the Carolina Panthers with Jatavian Sanders and Tommy Tremble. Awesome spot. The Bucs are really vulnerable, but obviously Kyle Pitts skews this dramatically, but it was trending in a great direction going in to last week. So maybe you're more excited than I am, but I don't see why you would trust Jatavian Sanders. And then Evan Ingram gets a good matchup on the season. The Jags have been vulnerable to tight ends, but lately they're getting their shit together, and it is down to 7.2 points per game. That's 5 points less than the season-long average. So really a bigger downgrade than upgrade against the Jaguars. I'm not going to trust Evan Ingram this week. He's very matchup dependent this year. This one is a bad spot. Next matchup goes to the Seahawks facing Colby Parkinson. He shit the bed, but Terrence Ferguson did play well, but Ferguson did drop a second opportunity at a touchdown. That wouldn't have happened had Adams been active. So missed on Colby Parkinson. Ferguson finally steps up. The rookie I believed in dating back to the summer was actually decent against the Seahawks. Next matchup goes to the Patriots against Andrews and Likely. After the bagel from Likely with no targets, I am never starting Likely ever again. Next matchup goes to George Kittle against the Colts. So that matchup is trending a little bit down at the moment, down to 8 points per game, but still, I think George Kittle will find a way to exploit it. These next two have been positive upgrades, actually. So Travis Kelce could be on display as a showcased weapon for them. It's probably his last 3 games of his career, and I do think they're going to send him off with a lot of targets. So I like Travis Kelce, especially if Rashee Rice doesn't play. He's kind of an automatic top 10 play. And the Titans are giving up 16 plus points per game to the position last 4 weeks, a top 5 matchup at the moment. Another top 5 matchup, top 3 in the last month, goes to Brenton Strange going against the Broncos. They've been actually very vulnerable, cannot stop the tight end position. If we rewind about a month ago, they would have ranked like 25th. They have quickly risen up the board to 13, and in the last month, it's definitely the reason why. 16.8 points per game allowed. That is the exact opposite of what we're looking at with the Carolina Panthers as the next matchup on the board here. Cade Otton, I would definitely fade. The average in the last 4 weeks is down to 6.5 points allowed. So Otton will be healthy enough to play, but not going to start him. And then this next matchup is extremely difficult. The Vikings are really stopping opposing tight ends. Theo Johnson is dynamic, but I think this will be a tough spot for him. Not going to start Theo Johnson against the Vikings, the second toughest matchup in the last month. Next matchup goes to Luke Musgrave against Chicago. Pretty neutral, and in general, I don't trust him, so let's not put him in the lineup. Next matchup goes to the trio of Steelers tight ends. So pick your poison with Darnell Washington, Jonnu Smith, and Pat Freiermuth. If I had to pick one this week, give me Freiermuth, but it feels way too random to believe it'll work out. Next, we have the Cowboys as an interesting matchup here. More of a downgrade, though, for Oronde Gadsden. Not as neutral anymore. Next matchup goes to Jeremy Ruckert because Mason Taylor's out. The Saints are very difficult lately, so not going to start him. And then the Packers are a very tough spot lately, only 6.1 points per game, and they're hosting Chicago. So if that's going to be split between Loveland and Kmet, then even if one of them scores a touchdown, you may not go over 10 points with the Bears tight end core. I do worry about that a lot, but because of the injury to Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, they're probably much safer, more enticing plays. Even against Green Bay, I'd probably rule out the downgrade. Next matchup is positive lately, definitely trending up. That goes to Brock Bowers against Houston. That ranks as a top 10 matchup in the last month, giving up over 13 points per game. Another positive matchup lately goes to the Chargers opponent. That would be Jake Ferguson this week, a top 12 matchup in the last 4 games. Next matchup is the toughest overall in the last month. That goes to A.J. Barner against the Rams. And Barner did get open, did score a touchdown. Otherwise, though, he almost did nothing. It was kind of all on one play, his fantasy value on Thursday. Next matchup goes to Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid against Cleveland. You may not get more than 10 points. I'm not trusting Kincaid as much as of late. But then the Giants and Jets are both tied at 7.1 points per game allowed in the last month. The Giants are hosting TJ Hawkinson. Meanwhile, the Jets are on the road against Juwan Johnson. So they need Juwan Johnson a lot in New Orleans. I think the volume will be there. But when it comes to Hawkinson, I would definitely fade him. I'm never trusting him with McCarthy. Next matchup goes to Gunnar Helm and Chigokonkwo against the Chiefs. That offense actually relies on them a lot, so I could see them still work out, but no one rosters them, no one believes in them, no one actually starts the Titans tight ends. Next up, we have the Ravens matchup against Hunter Henry, a very tough spot for him, so not going to trust the Patriots tight end. And if he has a bad game, then maybe Drake Maye won't play as well either. But next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, a very tough matchup on the season. Definitely expecting less than 10 points per game allowed. However, against Dalton Schultz, maybe you still trust Dalton Schultz. In like full PPR leagues, I'd probably still think Schultz is a decent flex option at the position. But then we got the Eagles matchup going against Ben Sinnott. He didn't do much last week, had 36 yards on 1 reception, but not more than that. I still don't trust Ben Sinnott. But next up, this matchup is going to be still not one to worry about. The Trey McBride train going to keep rolling, and against the Falcons at home, I'm still going to start Trey McBride. But the matchup stats are tough. Maybe they are his kryptonite. And then lastly, we got the Bills matchup going against Harold Fannin, but Fannin feels like a surefire bet. Last 2 games, Fannin has 25 total targets, so not going to worry about it. The Bills, I don't think will stop him entirely. Going to keep Fannin in the lineup. But how do those stats impact my rankings? These are my preferences, the tight end rankings in Week 16, in my opinion. Number 1 is clearly Trey McBride. There's no way you're benching Trey McBride. He's the best tight end overall. And against Atlanta, especially with London coming back, that game is even more likely of a shootout. I know Harrison is going to return. However, Trey McBride is still money in the bank. Definitely going to keep him in the lineup. But at tight ends 2 and 3, these guys are no-brainers. There is no way I'm benching either of them. When it comes to George Kittle, while he was outscored by Pitts last week, in general, we trust Kittle way, way more than Kyle Pitts. A touchdown is usually guaranteed. Against the Colts, I'm not worried about it, and I definitely trust him the most among all pass catchers in San Francisco. So Kittle, always a lock in the lineup. Definitely a safe play. And then Kyle Pitts, after last week's performance, should be a lock as well. The matchup against Arizona has been top 5 this year, so another upgrade. He's healthy. He's good to go. Even with London coming back, Pitts is a lock in the lineup, in the top 3. We have tight ends 4 through 6, and I think all these guys are also locks in the lineup. After last week, if Goddard helped you advance with 22 points, I would definitely trust him again. We've seen some elite upside from Goddard this season, and while at times it's hard to know when the bad games are coming, even know when the good games are coming, the upside is just so high. He's more valuable in terms of upside than just about anyone rest in the rankings. So I think it's worth it that Commanders matchup is top 4 this year, and Goddard gets a huge upgrade. I think just like last week, he will score a touchdown and could go over 100 yards. I think the production will be there. I trust Goddard quite a bit. The ceiling is just so valuable. I wouldn't want to bench him if he has another good game. So let's start him. I think top 5 for sure. And maybe you trust Brock Bowers more, but Bowers gets Houston, and if they're going to try to target anyone and limit them on offense, it's going to be Brock Bowers. So expecting a lot of double teams for Bowers. But if we look at the last 4 games, the Texans have actually allowed the 9th most fantasy points to the position. So that's where I'm not going to panic. It's still Brock Bowers, still a matchup nightmare for his opponents. And I still worry about Kenny Pickett, but not enough to fully fade Brock Bowers. Let's keep him in the lineup. Let's start Bowers. The lowest I can ever rank him is number 5. But if not for the matchup against Buffalo, I would have ranked Fannin higher than Bowers. Fannin is a lock for 10 plus targets. Last 2 weeks, he had 11 targets and 14 targets. Combined, that's 25 total, and that's insane volume, especially considering he's a rookie. That is wild. But in college, that's what he was doing. He set records. He had the most receptions and yards of any player in college football last year, and it looks like he is poised to be elite in the NFL. Love Harold Fannin. And Njoku's also out, and it doesn't look like Shedeur trusts Judy enough to overtake Fannin. So all the volume goes in his direction. The Bills are great at stopping tight ends, though, so given it's a downgrade, that's why I couldn't put him above Brock Bowers. Same tier, though, if that's what you'd rather do, be my guest, but personally, I think Bowers is still more talented than Fannin. So despite a matchup downgrade for maybe both of them on paper, it's better for Bowers, and I still think he's capable of overcoming adversity better than Harold Fannin. So just like last week, you might get 14 targets, but less than 10 points. He actually wasn't super effective. Some of those targets were uncatchable for Fannin. But these top 6, I think, are the best of the best. If you have these top 6, I would feel super confident about my odds of advancing. I think you're probably going to win the week at tight end with one of these 6. But maybe you're going against one of the other ones. Maybe that is the only way. That doesn't work out. But love McBride, love Kittle, love Pitts, Goddard, Bowers, and Fannin, I also think, are elite. Now we hit tier 4, and if you thought that my Matthew Stafford rank was bad, it gets worse. I did vehemently endorse Colby Parkinson going into Thursday's game, but it's not like tight end didn't produce against the Seahawks. That matchup had been awesome all season, and Terrence Ferguson had 1 touchdown, had a chance at a second, and that's where the points went. Sadly, not to Parkinson, but coming off his game the week before, I feel like it had to be the case where if you had Parkinson, you had to keep starting him. He just played so well, but I hope you didn't chase the points and pick him up off the wire and only plug him in this one game. So that would suck. I apologize for the rank, but he did have several drops. It seemed like the moment was a bit too big for him. And with no Adams, I thought the volume would increase. If anything, they just bracketed him more. The defense focused a bit extra on Parkinson. So he rarely got open. Stafford didn't look to him too often. That was a bad game I missed on Parkinson. But I don't think I'm going to miss on Travis Kelce. While there's a world that definitely blows up in your face, even with Minshew, I think he can play well. Against the Titans, it's a good spot. The defense is not scary at all. And in general, he's usually the safer bet for touchdowns in Kansas City. He's not gone away. He's still had good, usable numbers this year. And while I think Fannin is a better player this week, I do still trust Kelce, even with Minshew, especially because there's no Rashee Rice. That's the main reason why. With no Rice, they're probably going to showcase him. It might be his last 3 games of his career. They're probably going to give him a good send-off with a lot of opportunity to play well. So sad circumstances, no Mahomes, but even Minshew, I think, can get the ball to Kelce. He'll be fine. Definitely a top 10 play still in the league. Next up, though, we got Jake Ferguson, and the Chargers matchup's been a little tough, but lately it's the only easy matchup against them. They're stopping every other position, actually giving up top 12 numbers to tight ends in the last 4 weeks. So Ferguson, I do think, is worth a start this week. The upside's pretty high, and given the Chargers are so good at stopping receivers and even running backs a little bit, I do think Ferguson has some of the higher touchdown upside of any Cowboy this week. I think if it's going to go in the end zone to anyone, more likely, if it's not Lamb, it's Ferguson, in my opinion. So some value this week. I do like him quite a bit, especially if Pickens continues to shit the bed. Next up, though, I struggled to rank Loveland a little bit earlier in the week, but I settled on number 10 because of the Rome Odunze and Luther Burden injury. I'm worried about Cole Kmet still. I'm also worried about this matchup. The Packers are giving up about 6.5 points per game to the position last 4 games, and they're really stepping up. It's a bottom 5 matchup in that span. So that's a problem, but just a couple weeks ago, Loveland faced this team and did score a touchdown, but had very limited yardage. Didn't play well in terms of yardage. So that's my main concern here. The Packers are stepping up. They are not giving up much ground to the tight end position. So if not for the injuries to receivers in Chicago, I would rank Loveland maybe like 4 spots lower. I used to think he was more of like a flex play with risk, but as I've come around closer to game time, I do think he's more legit in the lineup. So I do think you should start him. I think at worst, he's a high-end flex play, and I would probably expect a touchdown. With no Odunze or Burden, the volume should go up, and I think he plays well. The shootout potential in this game is actually pretty high. So this game's at home. The rookie, I think, will have some good upside. I like the potential. Loveland has a lot of paths for success. He should be a good option this week against Green Bay. But now we've hit tier 5, and I think outside the top 10, these guys are a little bit trickier. Higher end flex options, maybe not locks in a typical 10-team league. But if you have Mark Andrews, if you made it this far, let's start him this week. The matchup against the Patriots is pretty good. Would rank top 10 on the season. So last week was pretty indicative that they don't trust Likely. Likely had a bagel, not a single target. And Andrews didn't have a great game either against Cincinnati. He couldn't exploit it himself. But Andrews, I think, is in general a safer bet. And his recent contract extension is why I'm going to trust him. I think the Lamar Jackson offense offers some passing touchdowns this week. And in general, Andrews is the more reliable option in the red zone. So I think he'll have a touchdown this week, but I doubt he goes over 50 receiving yards. And I could also see it blow up with less than 20. So good luck with Andrews. High risk, but I think the reward is worth it. That Patriots matchup would indicate he has a good game. They've been a top 10 matchup on the season. But the best matchup this year goes to Darren Waller. The Bengals have been a gold mine. But last week I was just so convinced that Isaiah Likely would pan out, and it was terrible. The well ran dry against the Bengals. So will it remain dry? That's a big up in the air question mark. I do not know, especially given Quinn Ewers is the quarterback. But in general, we want to just chase the Bengals defense and not ask questions. I still think Ewers could step up. I like Mike McDonald's system, and I definitely trust Waller to get some looks in the red zone. Against Cincinnati, in general, a touchdown is a very safe bet. So just like Andrews, I'm projecting a touchdown for Waller. Otherwise, it's hard to know what you'll get, and that's where I think I wouldn't start him over someone like Loveland, Andrews, or Jake Ferguson. So good luck with Waller. Last week, I think, is not indicative of what you'll get this week, despite the awesome matchup. Last week, I think, is a bit too optimistic to repeat. Next matchup, though, goes to Juwan Johnson, who I think will get extra volume with no Devon Vele. The Jets matchup is pretty good. Maybe not for the specific position he plays, but in general, that defense is given up, and I just know volume will be going in this direction. So Juwan Johnson, I think in full PPR is a very safe floor play. I would envision at least 7 half PPR points, and at tight end, that's pretty dope. That's definitely not going to cost you your week. It's a reliable floor to bet on. I think the volume will be good for Juwan Johnson in this game. If you get a touchdown, which is definitely possible, it's the Jets after all, you could well go over 13 points. I like Juwan's upside, not just his floor. But then we have Dawson Knox, who's been outperforming his teammate Kincaid, and I have them back-to-back. Kincaid, you would think, is the safer play. The matchup against Cleveland is not that scary, but at the moment, it looks like Kincaid is just not fully healthy, and Allen has gone back to one of his favorite teammates. Dawson Knox is good. They pay Dawson Knox a lot. He had a great career going before they drafted Kincaid, and ever since then, it's been very tough to trust him. But he's been really good the last 2 games. Touchdowns are critical, though. The volume at times exceeds 4 targets, but very rarely does that happen. So if all you get is 4 targets, you need a touchdown, and maybe I don't go chasing the last 2 games just because they've been good. I feel like this is kind of similar to Isaiah Likely last week. 2 good games, a decent matchup, worthy to be trusted, but right when you finally think he's valuable, he does nothing. So good luck there, but I do think I'd rather go Knox than Kincaid if I was going to go a Bills tight end. I don't trust Kincaid right now. He's had very low volatility. When he has a bad game, it is awful. No thanks with Kincaid. But all those guys who were in my top 15, now we're exiting that. And I think in a typical non-tight end premium league, you're not going to be in dire straits where these are the guys you are trusting. But maybe you are. Maybe those really elite options are not available on the waiver wire. And perhaps the best guy you could offer would be Dawson Knox in your lineup. And maybe you just really don't trust it. Maybe you think that's disgusting. So maybe you're going to trust with who got you here in the first place. If you've been streaming the position, then these names are definitely a little bit more familiar. We do have Dalton Schultz at the top of this tier at tight end 16, but the matchup for him is awful. The Raiders have really limited tight ends all season long, and that is where I'd be worried. But last week, it didn't matter. Dallas Goedert had an awesome game, but in general, Schultz is super matchup dependent, and it's extremely unlikely he scores a touchdown. So last week it did hit, but the matchup was awesome. Against Las Vegas, it's the opposite. I don't want to trust the upside with Dalton Schultz, but his floor, generally speaking, is pretty reliable. I think in full PPR, he still gives you minimum 7 points, but that's not ideal. In full PPR, I think we can try to chase 10. More often, that's still viable in full PPR. But Theo Johnson has some upside, but a bad matchup against the Vikings. They've been really tough, really limiting every tight end they face. So I would be worried, but his connection has been good, and he definitely gets targeted down the field. Last week, he only had 3 catches, but over 70 yards. So I do think he's decent. I think he's a legit lower end flex play, but outside the top 15, odds are I bench Theo Johnson. However, I am really excited about Brenton Strange, to be honest with you. That Broncos matchup is really positive right now. They're giving up an average of 16 plus points per game to the position. So Strange doesn't really split it with anyone else. If you get like 75, 80% of that all to yourself, you'll be ecstatic with Brenton Strange. So it will rely on a touchdown, but he has stepped up at times. There was a touchdown for him a few weeks ago that was negated by a Jacoby Myers false start. So they do look to him. He does score touchdowns at times. This matchup is indicative of an upgrade. I like him a lot, but when he doesn't contribute, you're also getting burned. So low floor, high ceiling. Maybe I'm too low, but more of a DFS option. Not the safest bet in the semifinals. And I would like to tell you that Cole Kmet is safer, but just like Loveland, there's only so far I can upgrade him. And Kmet is definitely the backup behind Loveland, but he will need to step up. He has scored touchdowns at times. I could see him play very well in this spot against Green Bay. But will I endorse him at this stage in the ranks at tight end 19? I think odds are you're going to bench him. High upside, but not worth my time. I only feel confident in betting on Loveland. So let's avoid it, but I think it could work out. All these tight ends in this tier, I could see work out, but it feels a little bit too gross to endorse. And no better example than Tyler Warren, who's been awesome this year, but with Rivers, he loses all value. Unless Richardson starts, then no way I'm bumping up Warren to a higher tier. The floor is 1 point. Wouldn't shock me at all if he gets less than 2 points. But maybe he has that Josh Downs role in the red zone this week. Maybe that check down on the goal line goes to Tyler Warren. The matchup against the Niners is pretty good. It's been a top 6 matchup all year, top 5 in the last month. So want to upgrade him, but just can't. Sadly, he is tight end 20 in my rankings because of the quarterback. But I did have Barner here going into Thursday. I had him exactly at tight end 21, and he did have that touchdown. It did work out with Barner. So that's an example of how this tier could go for you, but it obviously wasn't the safest bet. It didn't feel good to trust Barner going in to Thursday. So it worked out. Definitely good luck with any of these guys, but in general, outside the top 15, I will be benching these tight ends. But they're not the only tight ends on my radar, and sadly, this position is pretty deep, so these guys don't make the cut. There's no way I'm starting them. But to be honest, I think there's an argument to be made for all of them, at least as floor candidates, if not some high upside swings as well. There's no better example than a tight end I like that no one's going to start. We got Gunnar Helm here of the Titans that is actually the go-to target, not just in the red zone, but for Cam Ward at the moment. Him and Chigokonkwo are the top targets in Tennessee. Since Ridley's gone down, it hasn't been a receiver that stepped up. At times, DK steals some headlines, but in general, it's Okonkwo moving the chains and Gunnar Helm doing the same, but more often finding the end zone when they get in close. So I do prefer Gunnar Helm. I think the upside's higher. I think he's the future in that offense, and I do think next year he'll have a lot more value in fantasy. But this season, it's just still hard to bet on. Against the Chiefs, it's not a terrible matchup, but to start a Titans tight end, yikes. You got to be very desperate and kind of asking to lose. If they shit the bed, wouldn't shock me at all. But look at their game log. If you don't believe me, they are stepping up. Last week, they both went over double digits. But Oronde Gadsden, I think at this point in time, not worth betting on. The matchup against Dallas is tough. And the Justin Herbert hand injury really limits the upside. If I'm starting anyone in LA, it's not the tight end, Oronde Gadsden. He's just not played well last few games. I think he's fallen off a cliff, to be honest. So Gadsden, I'm going to avoid. Might step up in the playoffs, but this week against the Cowboys, I'm going to fade him. Then we got Mike Gesicki, who's capable of going over 15, just like Gadsden. It's definitely possible, but with Gesicki, the rotation in Cincinnati is so random. It could go to Tanner Hudson. It could go to Drew Sample. At least Noah Fant isn't active. That removes one other candidate. But right when you want to trust Gesicki, even in a good matchup, he will let you down. I don't feel good about it. But if T. Higgins is indeed ruled out, I could see myself 10 spots too low on Gesicki. But in the fantasy playoffs, semifinals with everything on the line, not my cup of tea, not how I want to go out swinging. Not a safe bet, in my opinion. Generally safe bet, though, is Evan Ingram. Generally, the floor is pretty decent with Ingram, but I don't think I want 6 points at tight end this week. So just because some upside's higher with everyone else, he's lower, but I could easily see him finish in the top 15. If you tell me you get 7 points out of Ingram, that's my projection on like Juwan Johnson, and that's just a safer bet in my opinion, but wouldn't shock me at all if that's also what Evan Ingram does provide. But his matchup's tough. I would bet against it. Not my cup of tea with Ingram this week. And then Luke Musgrave, also tough bet to make, but maybe they rely on him. The Chicago matchup is a little bit enticing, but nowhere near as good as last week. So let's fade him. I don't think it's worth it. Musgrave has been unproven up to this point in his career. But if we're going to take a swing, no better upside than gambling with Taysom Hill. Maybe you faced off against Puka Nacua. However, that's the only circumstance I would do it. You have to already be really desperate and projected to lose big time, because that's the only way it works out. If Taysom drops like 30, you know it's going to happen at some point. Before he retires, he will have one more blow-up game. Why not against the Jets? They're without Alvin Kamara. They're without Devin Neal. How much do they trust Audric Estime? And last week we saw ETN totally torch them. The Jets are an elite matchup for not just tight end, they're okay, but really running back. That's where I'm interested with Taysom Hill. But the production just hasn't been there. Even when guys are going down, the rush attempts don't really increase for Taysom Hill. But watch him contribute at some point. It does feel inevitable. He has a good game. So this is just an absolute home run swing, just shooting for the fence. If you get 1 point or less, don't be surprised with Taysom Hill. But it's all or nothing. You're either getting 1 point or 35, and I would say 95 times out of 100, you will get less than 5 points. But that's it for my tight end rankings. I think the top 10 are really the guys I want the most. Andrews and Waller, I think, find the end zone, but starting with Juwan Johnson, that's where I think that goes away from the projection, and we're just trying to chase volume, hoping for touchdowns. Ideally, that's what happens, but in general, I just want the best athlete at the position I can find. So good luck with Juwan. I know Dawson Knox might not qualify as the best athlete, but his circumstances, he's been good lately. I do like that matchup against Cleveland. So good luck there. If you're stuck on the waiver wire, I suppose my highest ranked guy would be Dawson Knox. But lastly, I want to talk about the defensive position, and number one is the clear no-brainer. The Houston Texans are hosting Kenny Pickett and the Raiders, and if you are benching them, you are a madman. Fuck you, you're wasting the best option on the week. But I'm sure there isn't a soul that's willing to do that. Let's move on to defense number 2 and 3. I believe the Saints are the second best play. I was definitely wrong about the Rams. They gave up overtime stats, and that big comeback didn't work out for them, but they looked okay in the first half. They almost had a pick 6. Sadly, they were tackled at the 1 and couldn't capitalize that extra 6 points. Would have been nice. So the Rams at number 3, probably not going to work out, but I do like the process of starting the Rams. Defense against Sam Darnold. The first time Darnold looked good against the Rams. But at number 2, a defense I did tell you would be better than the Rams that was widely available on the wire on Thursday was New Orleans. And maybe they were already taken, but definitely against Brady Cook and the Jets, they're going to play well at home. I think they're going to be awesome. Love the floor. High upside as well. Maybe the turnovers don't hit, but I definitely don't see you getting burned. That's for sure against the Jets. So love the Saints. Awesome matchup. Definitely an awesome upgrade for the Saints. But in the top 6, I do feel like I can trust the matchup for all 3 of these defenses, or just the talent. There's at least a lot of talent with defense number 6. But defense number 4 is Buffalo. Anytime you face off against Cleveland, you typically want that defense. Other than the Titans, who are dog shit, the matchup against the Browns has been awesome. So last week, I was a little bit worried to fully endorse the Chicago Bears coming off of Shador's awesome game versus Tennessee. But then they shit the bed, and now I'm definitely convinced that even Buffalo with a bad defense this year can't step up against the Browns. So let's keep them top 5. I think no-brainer. I'm not going to overthink it. Anyone against Cleveland is a defense I would like. I'm willing to go out swinging. If I lose with the Bills this week, that's fine. I think it's a fine process to lay it all out on the line with. Against Cleveland, that's a matchup I would like. But against Phillip Rivers and the Colts, I think the Niners are a good play. Maybe they give up a lot of points to Jonathan Taylor, but in general, they step up, and I just don't see anything out of Phillip Rivers to feel confident that they'll torch you. There's no way you get garbage time. I really don't think it is something to worry about at all. The Niners feel very safe, in my opinion, against the Colts. I want to bet against Phillip Rivers this week. Last week, it didn't quite work out. The Seahawks were fine, but not amazing. However, I think the Niners are going to force an extra turnover, and the points they give up are definitely less than 20. That's the max. Probably less than 16, if I had to guess. But I also like the Vikings this week, mainly because of their talent. The Giants' offense is okay at times, but they don't have neighbors. They're missing some pieces, and I think the Vikings really step up on defense. Brian Flores is coaching for his next job. I think he's one of the better candidates in this upcoming cycle. And I do think with that in mind, that's the main reason they're winning. They're playing lights out on defense. So against the Giants, I think Jaxson Dart will struggle. I'm going to trust Brian Flores and that defense of the Vikings. A good top 6 play, high floor, high upside, if you ask me. But then in the top 10, this is the tier where I'm going to just trust the talent of the roster. These defenses may not get the best matchup, but based on how they're composed and played this season, they've been so good and definitely forced a lot of turnovers. The process of just trusting them no matter what still applies. And while maybe I was wrong with the Seahawks, that game went into overtime, didn't have Devontae Adams, and weather did help them going into the game. I thought they would be fine. So didn't work out, but Stafford is just that good. Sadly, I was wrong here. But the Eagles in division against the Commanders don't fear Washington very much, so they should be good. They can lock up the division. I think they will win on Saturday. I do want to start them. They're my defense number 8, and I think they're clearly a safe start. Top 10, I do think they need to be in the lineup if you got them. But then we got the Chargers, who I do still trust for turnovers. Despite the Cowboys matchup, I don't fear George Pickens as much anymore, and if that's no longer the case, then Dak Prescott isn't as scary. So they just forced so many turnovers. I think that's a product of their system, not just a lucky situation. And I do trust the Chargers to step it up and continue that in a must-win, in my opinion. Their only shot at the division is if they win out the rest of the way. So they're going to beat the Cowboys. They will do it with a good defense. I trust the turnovers with the Chargers. But some risk factoring in for sure. The matchup's not ideal against Dak Prescott, but the matchup's not ideal for the Broncos either, hosting the Jaguars. But at home, at altitude, I think there's still a defense I want to start. Definitely too talented to fully fade. And against Jacksonville, maybe it's a shootout, but odds are it's more like the Packers game, and they still have a high floor. The Broncos, I think, are still top 10, but definitely not elite. If you could somehow get the Saints off the wire still, go with New Orleans over Denver or anyone else, then the Texans. Other than Houston, I think the Saints are the best play you can find. But then in tier 5, outside the top 10, these are the only other ones I think I would be comfortable being forced to play if I was in a deeper format and these were my only options. Fuck it, that's the best we can do. Let's put them in the lineup and hope for the best. But don't feel great about it. Definitely a lot of risk moving forward, and they don't quite have the roster and talent to feel safe about the floor. But the Titans, I think, get a break here against Gardner Minshew. With no Rashee Rice, I think that definitely helps them a lot. And in my opinion, the Chiefs are going to be quitting before halftime. I just don't think with the loss of Mahomes that they are willing to play up to speed in the NFL. I think they're destined to lose. I think the Titans will capitalize. The Titans are ready for a win, and I think they will step up given the Chiefs are coming off a dynasty. So Titans need it. I think they step up. I think they're interesting, but still I could also see Gardner Minshew make you regret it. The Titans have such a bad defense. It feels gross, but against Minshew, I think it's fine at defense 11. I think the floor is interesting, but I got burned endorsing them against the Browns a few weeks ago. Perhaps this is a terrible choice by me, but the Chiefs in the same game, I think, are also kind of interesting against Cam Ward. It's not like the defense got hurt, so that's interesting, but I feel like they're going to quit. I feel like they don't care how this game turns out on the scoreboard. So I doubt they're that safe, but the matchup on paper says neither quarterback is scary. So good luck there, but the Panthers hosting Tampa Bay, it's a game for their entire season, and I think they come out with the win. If that's going to be the case, it's because their defense probably gets some turnover luck. So good luck there, but against Baker, I think I'd likely just pass. And then even against Justin Herbert and the broken hand, the Cowboys don't inspire much confidence. The Cowboys suck on defense, but maybe some turnovers work out. They could still technically win the division, but odds are they're eliminated by kickoff, and odds are they don't show up. So not going to trust them. They give up so many points. They suck in fantasy. But the Dolphins against Joe Burrow at home in hot, humid temperatures, I could see play well because Burrow looked like shit against the Ravens. It feels like the Bengals have quit, have nothing to play for. If that's indeed the case, then the Dolphins are still all playing for their job, and at home, they have stepped up at times. So their defense 15, I doubt you'll trust him, but in a deeper format, they actually do pique my interest if you're desperate. But in general, I'm not going to stoop this low. Feels destined not to work out. But then lastly, the final tier, defenses 16 through 24, are here on the screen, and I'm not starting any of them, but they do just miss the cut outside the top 15. So maybe there's a world where the Ravens-Patriots game is low scoring. I do think the Ravens win, so I have them ranked above, but I do worry that this game is a shootout. I don't think it's worth it. But maybe the defense does wake up. But Patriots, only way they can win, in my opinion, is if they do step up on defense, but I don't think they win. I think it's going to be tough against Lamar. The Jags defense is good, but against Denver and Sean Payton's offense, I'll bet against it. If this game was in Jacksonville, then maybe. But in Denver, I worry that they shit the bed. The Chicago Bears against Green Bay game, I think, is more likely a shootout, so let's bench both of them. The Bears, I think, win, so that's a tiebreaker over the Packers. The Packers without Micah Parsons, just a floor play, not a safe for one anymore. The Lions against the Steelers, don't trust Rodgers, but the Lions defense sucks and still probably gives up garbage time, so not worth it. The Bengals against the Dolphins, the Bengals defense is totally checked out. The Bengals, even against Quinn Ewers, I don't think can capitalize. Not going to lie, even Achane can dominate them on his own. But the Giants against the J.J. McCarthy offense maybe has some value. It's McCarthy, so maybe that's worth it. But then Tampa Bay in division, I think, gives up a lot of points to the Carolina Panthers. Maybe they win the game. Maybe they were so embarrassed last time. But in general, they've been terrible. I wouldn't trust them at all. So those are my defensive rankings. Really, I'm trusting the top 10. And ideally, we're getting the Saints if we don't have Houston. The Saints are the league winner, in my opinion, off the wire. But perhaps they're already taken. Maybe you can get your hands on the Vikings still, but I doubt it. Then we're stuck with maybe the Chargers, because some people still don't believe in them. But it's going to be tough at defense this week. I don't see a lot of good options. Not going to lie. It's pretty slim pickings, in my opinion. So that's it. That's it at all three positions. A reminder, these are the defensive final rankings, and then I will flash you the other two positions before I go. These are quarterbacks. All of my rankings at quarterback, we're really trusting the top 10 ideally. I wish I had Stafford like 10 spots higher, but nope, I fucked up, and apologies were mentioned many times in this video. But Cousins, I think, is the best waiver wire option. If somehow you can still get Brissett, then fire him up, but really it's Stroud and Cousins is definitely the guy that nobody else is looking to. So want that matchup if I can get it, but Caleb and Love are still pretty interesting. Dak, I think, is still valuable. Baker and Herbert have arguments to be made to start, but to be honest, I think the floor is safer with Kirk Cousins and the top 10. So good luck. Brissett going to dominate, but I'm trusting Nix, Lawrence again, Goff, Lamar, Hurts, and Allen the most. Maye, Purdy, and Stroud, I think, will give you 20-plus points. And then lastly, these are the final rankings at tight end. Good luck if you have to stoop to someone like Dawson Knox, but he is on a heater. Last two games have been good, and I do still kind of believe in the upside. But ideally, we're rolling with someone like Colston Loveland or Harold Fannin, Kyle Pitts, and George Kittle. Like, the top 10 are really where it's at. Really, the top 6. Once we hit Kelsey, that's where I'm starting to get worried. But Loveland should play well. I also trust Ferguson. And then Kelsey with no Rashee Rice should work out. But maybe Gardner Minshew is just that bad. But once we hit Andrews, you're just hoping for a touchdown. It gets kind of grim and sad the rest of the way. But all the way through Chigo Conquo, to be honest, I do think there is value at the tight end position. I do think it's still kind of interesting. And then there's name value. And then lastly, Taysom Hill. Good luck if that's the best you can do. Maybe it does finally work out with Taysom Hill. But that is it. That's it for this video. I hope you made it to the end. If you did, hit that like button before you leave and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll see you next time. My name's Adam Riancho. I'll have injury updates, running back and wide receiver rankings out before Sunday morning. Look out for that. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.